Now, US President Donald Trump has given Iran shifting deadlines to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. That's as Iran insists the key waterway isn't actually closed and that only ships that belong to its enemies are barred from passage. Trump issued his first ultimatum about the strait back on March the 21st. He threatened that the US would bomb Iran's power plants if the strait wasn't reopened within 48 hours. He later extended that deadline by 5 days, claiming that negotiations with Iran were underway. Trump then issued a new deadline on March the 26th. This time he gave Iran 10 days, or until the evening of April the 6th, to reopen the strait. Trump has issued his latest Hormuz threat on Sunday after vowing to bomb power plants and bridges if Tehran doesn't comply. He posted what appears to be a Tuesday 8 p.m. deadline for a deal. OK, let's unpack this with our guests. We've got Ross Harrison as Senior Fellow at the Middle East Institute, author of Decoding Iran's Foreign Policy. He joins us from Washington, D.C. And we have Adam Weinstein, who is the Middle East Deputy Director at the Quincy Institute. He is in New York for us. Thank you to both of you. Adam, if I could start with you. So, US President Donald Trump setting a new deadline for Iran to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. So he's now saying Tuesday, 8 p.m. Eastern time, according to his latest post on Truth Social. Given his track record of shifting ultimatums, how seriously should we take this latest one?
You know, look, it's always a what if with him. I just don't know how seriously to take it because the way he crafts foreign policy is in a impulsive manner. But for the Iranians, I don't think the calculus has changed all that much because their goal here is survival, and they view a concession in the Strait of Hormuz without some kind of reciprocal guarantee as a threat to their survival, even if it ends the war.
Ross, to you, on the one hand, Trump is publicly taunting and threatening Iran, but in interviews, we saw one he did on Fox News recently. He suggested a deal could be reached within days. He said that before. From Tehran's perspective, how difficult does that make it to interpret U.S. intentions?
Well, I think they're accustomed to Donald Trump's style at this point. I think they assume that that what they're seeing in terms of Donald Trump's, frankly, escalatory language and profane language is a sign of frustration and a sign that there may be fewer options available to the United States to achieve the goal of opening the Strait of Hormuz. So I think they're interpreting this as to some degree success of their policy of sort of boxing Donald Trump in, and the fact that I think that they assume that this kind of escalatory language is going to be followed by some kind of escalation on the ground in the coming days. So that would probably be their assumption. Whether, in fact, that plays out, well, remains to be seen.
Adam, is there a coherent U.S. strategy here, or is policy being made in real time?
No, I think policy is being made in real time. I don't think there's a well thought out interagency process in terms of crafting policy. I think the policy that comes out of the White House, like I said before, is extremely impulsive. And I think we have to keep in mind the context of all of this, that now the stated end goal of this war is to reopen the Strait of Hormuz, which was open the day before the war began. I mean, this is a circular foreign policy. It's a war that was launched without real congressional approval, without a clear, achievable end state.
Adam, you're a former U.S. Marine. How concerned are you about mission creep here?
I'm very concerned about mission creep. I mean, I think the idea that we're going to launch a full-scale invasion of Iran, I think that's probably hyperbole at this point because there's simply not enough troops in the region or on the way to the region to make that happen. But if the Trump administration were to decide to seize an island or to enter coastal Iran for a brief period, I think things can get out of control very quickly, as we saw over the last 48 hours. War is unpredictable.
Ross, how do the Iranian leadership feel about the prospect of American boots on the ground?
Well, I'm sure they're not, they don't anticipate it in any kind of a positive way, though I think they're probably spent the last number of weeks preparing for it. I think that they are recognizing that that this boots on the ground approach may not have a clear political objective, Malene. That if in fact the boots on the ground will be used to try to open the Strait of Hormuz, it's likely to do the opposite. I think they understand that, which is the way they're interpreting Donald Trump's tantrum this morning. They're interpreting that, I think, to some degree, as a recognition of the fact that Donald Trump understands that a boots on the ground approach is not going to achieve the objective that it's purported to have, which is to open the strait. Because the minute the strait becomes a combat zone, ships aren't going to go through. So I think it's a recognition on the part of the Iranians that the United States might not have a clear political objective, and that there's really no way to achieve the goal of opening the strait with military means alone.
Adam, how does the US public factor into all this? Is this war beginning to hit Americans directly, whether that be fuel prices or the unstable markets? To what extent is any US decision-making versus this war being driven by political pressure at home?
Well, anyone who's filled their car with gasoline knows that it's hitting Americans. You know, there's a long-held attitude in Washington, I think, that Americans don't vote based on foreign policy. It's a factor, but at the end of the day, they'll vote based on domestic policy, and they don't always make the connection between things that are happening domestically and their connection to foreign policy. So I think it's a factor. I don't think it's an overwhelming factor, even though it's undeniable that this war is deeply unpopular among the American public. But we also have to remember that the Iranians also have their own politics. And again, I have to reiterate that I think what the Trump administration has miscalculated about the Iranian regime is that its goal here is survival, and it's willing to take incredible losses to achieve that and not appear as if it's backing down to the United States. I mean, we forget historically, Iran was willing to take 200,000 losses in the Iran-Iraq war before they finally agreed to bring an end to the war. Of course, that was a war that was inflicted upon them. But the Iranian regime is not going to negotiate at gunpoint in a way that looks like it's conceding to Trump's demands.
Ross, to you on that point, I mean, if Iran refuses to negotiate under threat of attack, what options does it have to de-escalate without effectively surrendering key parts of its economy, especially its energy sector? And, you know, as we heard there, you know, there's also the people of Iran to consider.
You know, Malene, I think what Iran has done thus far in terms of its war strategy over the last 5 weeks is it's expanded horizontally. And it has done that by extending the war out to the Gulf Arab states, including Qatar. But I think if, in fact, there is an attempt to escalate on the part of the U.S., I think you'll see even a further escalation vertically. I think what the Iranians are calculating, Malene, is that if they see facts on the ground, they see escalation on the ground, and they see inflammatory language by Donald Trump, that indicates to them that they have few options but to keep escalating or keep fighting. I think what the signals they're going to be looking for in terms to de-escalate are going to be a dialing back of the rhetoric, possibly an opening up of a real diplomatic channel, not just with Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, and some kind of actual de-escalation on the ground. At that point, the Iranians are going to be faced with a decision. Do they de-escalate or do they keep going? I think both parties are going to want to find an off-ramp, but I think it's a matter of timing and which one leaves the battle the highest on the escalation ladder.
And on the off-ramp, Ross, we've been hearing about these discussions involving Oman in the Strait of Hormuz, including ideas like transit fees tied to reparations. Is this Tehran testing a diplomatic off-ramp?
I don't think so. I mean, I think they're testing a possible regime for after the war on how they manage transit and revenues after the war. But I think in terms of signaling an off-ramp, I think they're going to be very careful about signaling an off-ramp until they see some kind of de-escalation on the part of the United States. And the reason for that, Malene, is very simple. They want to leave this war. They're determined to leave this war, having made the point that any kind of future attack that they will be able to exact a price on the United States or on Israel or anybody that attacks them. And the way to do that is to leave the war having reestablished deterrence. If they're seen as de-escalating prematurely, they will not have achieved their war objectives. So it's a very tricky tightrope over the next couple days and weeks, I would say.
And Adam, to you finally, where do Gulf countries come into this? Because Iran has threatened to attack more civilian infrastructure. That's already happening. We saw in Kuwait, Iranian drone attacks have damaged 2 power and water desalination plants. The worry is if the US attacks Iran's energy sector further, the Gulf will continue to pay the price.
Well, first of all, I agree with everything that was just said by the other guest in terms of Iran's calculation. Unfortunately, the Trump administration has shown that it doesn't care about U.S. partners. It doesn't care about the cost to U.S. partners. I think the strategy of Iran was to create chaos in the Gulf, and their hope was that they would create enough pain for the Gulf countries that those countries would go to Donald Trump and say, hey, you need to find a resolution for this. We're your close friends and we're really hurting. I don't know that the Trump administration really responds to that, which is unfortunate. And the real tragedy of all of this is, this shouldn't be taken out of context. We had a nuclear deal. The Trump administration left that nuclear deal. We have to ask ourselves, why were hardliners inside Iran always so hostile towards diplomacy, but they don't seem to have a problem with this kind of confrontation? It's because a war of choice by the United States against Iran doesn't actually threaten regime survival. They're willing to take a lot of pain, and they're very motivated to restore deterrence, as the other guest said. The only time that we've seen real flexibility on the part of the Iranians is when a U.S. government was willing to work with the more pragmatic actors inside the Iranian government towards a diplomatic solution, which is what the Trump administration should do. But I don't know if they've realized that yet.
OK, thank you to both our guests, Ross Harrison and Adam Weinstein.